Hi, we are here to talk to you about our new project, Step Up 10, and to tell you about all the good things that you can find in the project to work with your students. As a start, it's a very, very, very inclusive project. You have opportunities to work with your students with lots of different materials and lots of different options, more traditional, less traditional, more digital, more classroom-based, whatever you like. You can do with your students. And this is a project that is meant to help you and your students take their learning a step up and a step further. Step Up 10 is thought to be a very step-by-step approach to speaking and writing. It's very important for us because they are the productive skills. Thought-provoking topics and tasks. You have lots of challenging texts and ideas and videos to show your students and work with them. A very, very solid language focus. We want our students to learn the language communicatively, but with a solid grammar preparation. And lots of learning to learn tips to tell your students what is the best way to do something or learn something, and the full support for you as teachers. So what can I tell you about the project in more detail? We were very, very keen on the idea of sparking students' curiosity and interest in the topics they are supposed to study. They are compulsory topics, but that doesn't mean that they don't find them interesting and challenging. So we thought about the project based on the learning outcomes, and we always show them the learning outcomes to guide students through the learning process. We always start with a kickoff, an activity to start them and to introduce them to the topic. And then in the second part of the start, so to speak, they will have a quiz or an activity to do to enhance their learning of the topic and the most important vocabulary of the topic. So you will have contextualized videos to introduce the topic, and as I said, quizzes and vocabulary to elicit and enhance the essential vocabulary of the unit. Another very important thing for us is to help your students understand a very wide variety of texts which are very appealing to their curiosity, to their curious and inquisitive minds. So reading is an essential part of our project. You will have lots of different genres and types of texts. This one, for instance, is a personal account, a personal experience of a student their age to tell them about an experience he went through when he was at school, exactly as your students. And then all the reading work of the texts with a wide variety of exercises to allow them to do what? To recognize and identify vocabulary and ideas, to understand ideas and do interpretations, and to apply knowledge and to analyze topics. And then you have to develop other skills. So grammar, what do we want to do with grammar in our project? We consider grammar a very important and solid foundation to the learning of the language. So we have two major sections. We have the section Rule It, with clear explanations and example sentences with visual highlights. And then you have the second section, which is called Use It, with a wide diversity of exercises with different levels of difficulty. We also think it's very important to bring everyday issues and objects and realities into the classroom to learn grammar. So you'll find contextualized songs that are picking up on grammar topics that they are studying at the moment and make use for them to learn in a more contextualized and funny way.
I want you to be happier when the morning comes, when we see what we've become. In the cold light of day, we're a flame in the wind, not the fire that we begun. Every argument, every word we can't take back. 'Cause with all that has happened, I think that we both know the way that the story ends. Then only for a minute.
Also, As far as grammar goes, we have lots of grammar presentations with step-by-step explanations, lots of examples, so lots of things you can use in the classroom with your book or with a computer, whichever mean you are using to work with your students.
I've met a lot of people who speak several different languages. I've had experiences which made me grow as a person. My exchange program was in a country where people don't speak my mother tongue. I stayed with a host family whose children were adorable. Maggie was the one whom I could always talk to.
Who, which, whose, and whom are relative pronouns, and where is a relative adverb. Do you remember what they are for or what they refer to? Let's see the first example.
I've met a lot of people. Those people speak several different languages.
The word people is repeated in these two sentences. If we use the relative pronoun who to join these two sentences, we form a relative clause.
As far as other skills go, we would like and we think it's important to engage students with other teens' opinions, with stimulating videos, stimulating listening opportunities. So we have lots of videos, as you will be able to see, lots of listening and watching situations, a very big diversity of oral text genres you can explore in the classroom, and you will have a very, very important and useful option to work with your students. You'll have standard and slow version audios recorded always by native speakers for you to work with more proficient students or students who have more difficulty or show more difficulty in learning the language. So as far as watching, our focus is on authentic English contexts, as you will be able to check and videos with optional subtitles if you don't want to make your students understand without a visual support. You can easily make the option of showing them the subtitles. This is another example, is a very, very actual and day-to-day thing. It's a newscast which is exploring a day-to-day topic. So it's the opportunity of bringing the real world and real society into your classroom.
What this video is all about, Maury?
Well, Luke Culhane is a typical teenager who plays rugby and video games, but his passion for making movies is showing people how online bullying can cause real pain in the real world.
The video begins with a normal-looking teenager getting a nasty message on social media while walking down the street. At first he gets a bloody nose, but as the cyberbullying gets more intense, so do the teen's injuries. To a black eye, then finally his arm in a sling.
Yeah, we're saying that, like, even though it's cyberbullying, even though it's virtual, it still affects real lives.
It's the brainchild of its star, 13-year-old Luke Culhane, who was cyberbullied himself after he started making short films about his life and posting them on YouTube 3 years ago.
Have you ever cyberbullied anyone? Have you ever been cyberbullied? Have you ever witnessed cyberbullying?
So he decided to use the medium to send a different message, that bullying of any kind is not okay.
So throughout the book, students get tools that help them develop the skills they need to feel confident and comfortable in real-life situations. Students are provided with step-by-step approach that will guide them throughout all the stages of the writing and speaking process. In the sidebar, teachers can also find answers or possible answers to all the activities in the coursebook, including the spoken and written interaction I've just mentioned. We also provide students with suggestions that will help them learn to learn. We have Do It Right boxes where they can find tips on how to deal with issues like how can I answer a multiple choice question? How can I find evidence in a text? How can I distinguish between two tenses, for example? We also have the Help with Language box where they can find all the language they need to answer a specific task. For teachers, in the sidebar, We have the high-tech variation where we suggest some tools, technological tools, they can use to expand or to present things in an alternative way. At the end of each module, we have further exercises that will help students consolidate language from the units. So these pages focus on lexis and grammar, and students can also self-assess their performances. We have also aligned the coursebook with the demands of the 21st century, and so we present and offer some stimulating cross-curricular mini-projects. These will foster in students the development of critical thinking, creativity, and they will also establish a link between English and other subject areas.
So let's talk about extensive reading now, which is always quite an interesting and different approach to our classroom work. And it's not always easy to choose which book to work with as far as extensive reading goes. Again, it has to be challenging for the students, and it has to give them input on interesting and thought-provoking topics for them to discuss. So thinking about that, we chose a story that can also be seen. There is a movie of this story. We chose Ready Player One, which is a very, very interesting and sort of science fiction story about a group of teens and their avatars who try to solve the riddle of a game, a sort of a puzzle, and they need to do it because the result will ultimately change their lives. And this is all set in a dystopian city, a very, very far-fetched environment, very science fiction, very technological, very digital, and our conviction is that the students are going to enjoy it very much. So you'll have lots of different topics to work on, the story, as I told you, and they will start with a song, and then after the song, they will have the film to watch, and then a little extract of the book, and after that, they will be ready on their own to write their own book review and film review on the story and on the film. So we hope that it will be a very interesting experience for you and for our students.
Another strong point of the course book is the language bank. We give further help with speaking, writing, vocabulary, and grammar. So the language bank is divided into 4 parts. The first one is the language functions bank, where students can find a list of all the language functions we have covered in the course book. Besides, they can also see it in action. We have called this bit chunks in action, so students can get an illustration of how these language functions work in real-life meaningful situations. The second part is the writing bank. The writing bank starts with general tips about writing, and then students can again see the text types that were covered in the course book. These have highlights that show them and are linked back to the steps that they have on the left. Then we have the vocabulary bank that lists all the vocabulary in the book and expands it, and with extra exercises. We also provide a first part that teaches students to learn vocabulary according to their learning styles, and that can also be very helpful for them. So the exercises. Last but not least, the grammar bank, which covers all the items in the book in Portuguese and with further exercises. So this is an excellent tool for students to study and to revise all the contents in the book.
Okay, now let's talk about the workbook. And the workbook is a very important component of our project because it provides opportunities for further practice of vocabulary and grammar. And our workbook is divided into 3 parts. We have the worksheets, M&M, and also practice tests. And now let's see what they are about. So, vocabulary and grammar worksheets are about vocabulary and grammar, of course. And the grammar and vocabulary we have here is the same we have in the textbook. So, it helps consolidate what the work students have done in the textbook. And then we have music and movies, as the name says. It's about songs and films that are aimed at motivating students to learn the language. So now we have the songs, and now we have the practice tests. These tests help students prepare for formal assessment moments. They have the same structure and the same test item formats as the tests in the teacher's resource file. So there will be no surprises here, students. If students do these tests, they will be fully prepared to do the tests that there are in the teacher's resource file. We have a range of selected response items and also constructed response items that are very similar to the national exams too. So if students want to take the national exam, it's okay. They will be fully prepared to do it. Be prepared for mixed ability classes with step-by-step. And step-by-step is a very important component of our project too, because it has materials from the student's book that help develop the 4 skills. So reading, listening, speaking and writing. These materials are meant for students who may be below level and need extra help to do the regular activities. And by doing these activities, they will feel a part of the class because they will be able to do what the others are doing too, the activities the others are doing. And last but not least, we have the teacher's resource file. And it's divided into several sections. I would like to start by talking about the section of the level organized worksheets. They are organized into 3 levels, and they are meant to be used in mixed ability classes. Then we have progress tests. As I told you before, the test structure and also the test item formats are similar to the ones in the workbook. So if the students prepare by using the tests in the workbook, everything will be all right because these tests have the same structure and the same test item formats. We also have speaking assessment scripts to be used when we are assessing speaking, and also assessment rubrics for all skills. And they are very important nowadays, as we know, because of Projeto Maya. We can also find some extra mini projects to complement the mini projects there are in the textbook, and also the planning section. In the planning section, we have term plans, we have semester plans, and also lesson plans. And I would like to finish by saying that there is another section which is very important too. And we called it alternative assessment. This section gives teachers the opportunities to use other types of instruments to assess the students that are not only tests, because diversifying assessment methods is key to the success of all students. Let's talk about the powerful digital support that we can give you. So first of all, you can access the resources either online or offline. So if you have internet connection, you can use it online. If you don't, there are many resources which you can access even if you don't have internet connection. So we have the interactive manual. We have animations, videos, flashcards, karaokes, audios, and other resources embedded in the pages, and these give a new life to the textbook contents. They become much more motivating, and that is what we want. We want motivated students who want to learn the language. That's the most important. And also, with the interactive manual, we have direct access to textbook exercises and answer key, and also other project components. We have answers to all activities on textbook pages with automatic correction. We have answer key in one click, and we have the possibility of cleaning and do it all over again. What else can you find on digital? There are many important things you can find on digital, but there are 2 or 3 I would like to emphasize because of their importance. And those are interactive images with clickable points, videos with or without subtitles. You have the option to have subtitles and also the option not to have subtitles. And also the speaking kickoff, which really, really helps students to develop this very important skill. With our digital smart app, students can access videos to better understand and review topics. They can do quizzes and they have immediate explanations. They have progress assessment and it's accessible everywhere.
So, we're at the end of our presentation. What can we tell you? We can tell you that we hope that you've enjoyed our presentation. We hope that you see all the advantages of our project as a textbook for your students. We hope that you will find in it all the options you need, all the opportunities you need to step up your students' learning, to make them be happy and engaged in your English lessons. And again, what are the major tips and highlights of our book? Again, step-by-step approach to speaking and writing with all the steps you need to make them write and speak their own productions, thought-provoking topics and tasks, solid language focus, learning to learn tips, and full support for you and for your students. We hope you like it because our aim is to help your students take their learning a step up and a step further, and of course, help you take your teaching also a step up and a step further. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dave Tucker. Some of you may already know me. I'm a teacher and teacher trainer and author based in Portugal, and I'm also the consultant with Edições ASA for their English course books from the 5th to the 11th year. Today we're going to be looking at some of the material in Step Up 10 and how we can really use the material to its best effect to work with the teenage brain. Working with the teenage brain, as we all know, is sometimes not the easiest of things. But today we're going to be looking at some of the unique features of what's happening inside the adolescent brain and how we can really exploit some of the great material in Step Up to make the most of the way adolescents' minds work. So, of course, one of the questions which many people are curious about with adolescents and teenagers is how this adorable, cute, cuddly little group of children can, in a matter of a few years, turn into this, the rebellious, aggressive, in-your-face teenagers. Of course, we know that teenagers are not always like this, but it's one of the strong images that people have when they think of teenagers or adolescents. And many people also refer to this stage of adolescence or the teenage years as a negative time. It's a terrible time, it's a traumatic time, it's something to get through and get past. But let's remember that it also has many very positive features. I read a book by a guy called Dan Siegel, who's a clinical psychologist, and he mentioned that many of the people the adults in their middle years, in middle age, who come into his clinic, complain to him that in their middle years they don't feel any emotional intensity in their lives anymore, that they have no social expansion and they're not making new friends, that they have no new novelties in their life and they don't go looking for new experiences, and that they don't feel creative and they're not exploring new things anymore. On the other hand, he says, if we want to find the essence of adolescence, it's the exact opposite of that. It's emotional intensity which rules adolescents' lives. It's social expansion and always making new friends, at the same time, of course, of pushing away from their family. It's seeking new experiences and new ideas and new ways to explore the world around them. And it's also creativity and exploration which rules their lives. So in other words, the exact opposite of the sadder, later stage in people's lives, full of incredibly positive things to exploit. So let's take a look at what's actually happening inside the teenage adolescent brain, because there are vast changes happening in this period. One of the most important is called synaptic pruning. And in this stage, what happens is that many of the old neurons and connections that came from childhood are being cut away. And the amount of neurons is actually vastly reduced in this stage. But the connections that remain are stronger and faster, and they're coated in this material called myelin, which helps everything be superconductive and super fast, which is why teenagers are great at making connections and innovations and fast and imaginative thinking, much more than they were before and much more than you'll find in adults later. They also have different production of dopamine from adults. Teenagers have extreme production of dopamine when they get excited about something and much lower production of dopamine when they're bored. Dopamine, of course, is the substance which focuses people's attention and makes them feel good and want more of a certain thing. So when teenagers get excited about something, they get super excited about it. And when they're feeling bored, they feel super bored. There's also an interesting loop which happens, which helps teenagers, or all people in fact, but it's especially intense at this time, recognize when something makes them feel good and search for more and more of it, which is why teenagers especially get fixated on certain emotions and certain situations, and can also, in fact, at this stage, dangerously lead to addictions, which can install themselves later in life. It's an important stage. Another common feature of the teenage or adolescent brain causes these dramatic reactions, which we sometimes get from teenagers. It's difficult to see at times where they come from, but they do have a physical underlying cause. What happens in the adult brain when a stimulus is received by the emotional center of the brain is that it then takes a long route through the frontal cortex, where the powers of reasoning and caution and consideration take place, before it arrives at the amygdala. The amygdala is the section of the brain which tells us whether to fight or run away, whether to do battle or to let things go. So the adult brain deals very well with this, and by the time the impulse reaches the amygdala, the message might be, everything's cool, no problem. On the other hand, adolescents have a different way of communicating these things. Because the changes in the brain take place from the back to the frontal cortex in many adolescents is not complete yet, so they don't have these capacities of consideration and caution and weighing pros and cons. In that case, the main reaction goes directly from the emotional center of the brain to the amygdala, and we get these rapid and dramatic reactions which seem to come out of nowhere, but are just the normal functioning of the adolescent brain. We do have to be aware of this. It's very difficult to change it, but once we know what's happening, it makes it much easier to recognize and deal with. Now, earlier we mentioned this aspect of pushing away and leaving the protection of the family and making their own connections with people of their own age, making their new tribes. This is done in many ways through music and fashion and haircuts, and making these connections and expressing their own personality. It also makes it difficult sometimes for parents, you may be aware of this if you've had adolescent children, to communicate with children at this age. But, of course, it's all just preparation for young people to move away from the nest, to move out into the world, and to make their own way in the big outside world around them. So let's look at some ways we can really help the teenagers exploit all these unique features about the way their brain works. One of the most important, I think, is what I like to call sticking it to the man, which basically means reacting against authority, and especially where teenagers sense that there is some lack of justice or something unfair going on. Teenagers are very ready to get behind the underdog and to really fight for social justice. A great example of this is a video which you can again find on YouTube, which shows a group of young people who organised a campaign where they left 1,000 body bags outside the headquarters of the main tobacco company in the USA to show them what it looked like, the number of people they killed each day with tobacco. This caused the biggest reduction in smoking that had been seen in the last 20 years, and all because young people really got behind this cause. It's a great example of the way that teenagers really get together and fight for rights. This is exploited all the way through the Step Up book, and there are lots of things that they can really get behind, including changing the very school that they're studying in, or the question of censorship. Maybe they're talking about cyberbullying, which is so present these days, or other topics which come up through the book, which they can really get behind and express their will to change and make things better. One of the things we mentioned before is the way that the teenage brain is incredibly good at working fast and innovatively. This some people call fluid intelligence, and teenagers are great at using this to make connections. One thing I like to do with my teenage groups is to give them a topic and to get them to create a tree of connections out of it. So starting, for example, with the topic of adolescence, they then find words which are connected to that topic and expand the tree with new connections at each stage, and then start reducing it back down to one item at the bottom which resumes everything. This is my tree starting from adolescence, but if you give this tree with that heading to a group of teenage students, every single one of them will make something new and innovative and interesting which they can then share with their colleagues. Adolescents are great at making these new connections. So we can encourage them to do this all the way through the book by using the keywords in unit headings, or by helping them make brainstorms around topics and adding their own personal twist to things. Teenagers can really exploit their fluid intelligence and have innovative and interesting and shareable ideas about the material in the book. As we said, social expansion and interaction is incredibly important to teenagers at this time, when they're really making links with their peers and forming new groups. One thing I like to do is give them an old-fashioned paper version of a way to do this, based on Facebook, of course. I call it Paperbook, where they each have a page where they write something that's happened in their lives, and these are posted around the room, and students can wander around the room and make comments and likes about each other's posts. This is done in a paper format which can then be collected in, and each student collects and keeps the reactions and comments of their peers. Of course, nowadays, with all the technological expansions which we have, this can be done in many ways, online and in digital format. Lots of ways, for example, this Linoit or Padlets can be used to group teenagers' opinions and ideas and interactions, and put them in a format where everyone can join in and add and comment and interact with people in a digital format, which we know they like doing. So let's do everything we can to encourage them to interact in our classes. It's very important for them at this stage in their lives to interact and make these social connections. We can have them mingling inside the classroom, asking each other questions we've given them and finding out information, working in groups and sharing ideas. All the way through Step Up, you will find fantastic projects which give them innovative ways to share ideas and be creative and produce something which is worth watching for an audience. The idea of audience and sharing these ideas with a large group is also very important for them. So there are 3 areas which I think it's very important to build into lessons with teenagers and adolescents. The first of these is movement. It's very difficult for groups of teenage students to stay sitting still for hours on end, which is what they tend to do throughout the whole school day. Let's get them up out of their seats and moving around and sharing ideas. Movement really helps them keep focused. Another area is patience. We need to be patient As we know, students of this age can have these dramatic reactions at times, and we need to recognise this and be patient with them. If we're not patient, we'll get a very negative reaction back. And the other area is growth. We need to help students recognise that growth and improvement is possible. It tends to be the age where students get the idea that their intelligence is fixed and they can't actually develop and grow. But of course they can. If we help them recognise what went wrong and how to improve and do better next time, they can come away with the idea that constant growth and improvement is necessary and possible. So I'd like to leave you with a quote by Ken Robinson, the late, great Ken Robinson, who said, "Education is not preparation. The first years of life are not a rehearsal. Young people are living their lives now." We tend to think that education is some sort of preparation for the later adult stage of their life, but anything that happens to them in this stage of their life is as important as anything else that happens later. Step Up 10 is full of great material that will help them make the most of their fluid intelligence, their rapid thinking, their social interaction, and their creativity. And I know you're going to enjoy making the most of it.